Hey guys, what's up? How are you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Firstly, I want to thank you guys so much for 50 subscribers. Let's go, first milestone achieved. 50 subscribers. Thank you so much for everyone who subscribed. And if you are a viewer who hasn't subscribed yet, please subscribe, okay? I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers because I want to do something cool for 100 subscribers too. But anyways, for 50 subscribers, in order to celebrate 50 subscribers, I would be doing a Q&A. Now, if you guys have any questions, um, it could be about me personally. Please don't ask something that would dox me. I'm not trying to dox myself, but anything else, it could be about me, it could be about any different topic you want to ask about, and any of the questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below this video. I have already made a dedicated post where you can also drop the questions, but I would also love if you drop the comments, if you drop them in the comments of this video. So what about today's video? Well, today's video is what if tigers were introduced in the USA? Speculative evolution and speculative ecology. Now, this is the poll I made, and tigers in USA won by a small margin. Okay, so people who voted for 5 most glazed animals, don't be disappointed. I have half the slides made, so this video will come out really soon. Most likely next week I will be doing the Q&A video, and then next to next week I will definitely do the 5 most glazed animals. So today's topic is what if tigers were introduced in the USA? So how would we judge that? Well, we will have 3 different criterias based on which we will be judging this: environment adaptability, prey availability, and threats and competition. So without further ado, let's look at the first category, environment adaptability. Well, USA is a big place, isn't it? And it has so many different biomes in so many different states. Like, this doesn't even show all the biomes. This is not even showing Alaska, and you can already see how many different biomes there are. So while the tigers won't be able to thrive in every single of these biomes, to be honest, no other animal other than maybe humans and coyotes can survive in all of these. But we will mainly be looking into the two, you can say, regional variant, because they are not subspecies, they are actually regional variant of the same subspecies, which is the mainland tiger. And we will look into the Siberian tiger and the Bengal tiger, well, the Royal Bengal tiger, what is it called? So in this case, for the colder states like Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, Maine, shout out to Caleb, who's from Maine, by the way, and he makes all the cool arts for the hybrid stuff. So shout out to Caleb. I'ma send a tiger in your state. But anyways, those states we will consider the Siberian tiger, and for the warmer, more tropical states like Florida, California, Texas, maybe Arizona, for these states we will consider the Royal Bengal tiger. So how well do these creatures adapt to these environments? Well, for example, the Siberian tiger, which is mainly a cold adapted tiger, can actually survive minus 45 degrees Celsius, where the winter temperatures in Alaska ranges from minus 18 degrees Celsius to minus 35 degrees Celsius. Now, there are some places in Alaska further north which are much colder, but for the most part, tigers won't live there in general. We are talking about the more southern parts of Alaska or the central parts of Alaska. On the other hand, in the warmer side of things, the summer temperatures in Texas can be up to 35 to 38 degrees Celsius. However, tigers can survive up to 40 degrees Celsius. So it shouldn't be too big of a problem for tigers like Royal Bengal tigers to survive in the warmer states like Florida, Texas, or Arizona, California, etc. On the other hand, it won't be a big deal for Siberian tigers to survive in the harsh cold of Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, etc. So, temperature is not a problem for them. What about the habitat adaptability? Well, tigers prefer areas with very dense cover. They don't prefer areas with a lot of like arid open landscape. Tigers prefer areas with a lot of cover and quick access to water. They don't like super dry areas. They can survive in grasslands, but it's mostly alluvial grasslands, which are like grasslands with a lot of patches of large greenery. So forests in the middle of grassland. So they make like a mosaic pattern, and that's the type of grasslands tigers ideally prefer. But their favorite habitats are usually woodlands, mangroves, and swamps, as well as rainforests. On the other hand, in places where tigers don't do very well is sand dunes, rocky deserts, or semi-arid environments. Now, sand dunes aren't a problem because there aren't any sand dunes in USA per se, because the deserts in USA are mostly semi-arid deserts with some vegetation instead of being fully sand. And rocky deserts are also quite rare in USA. So for the most part, in the wilderness areas, tigers will do just fine, especially in the national park, unless it's like some really dry national parks, like something in the Utah or whatever. Tigers will do pretty well. So due to that, the environmental adaptability score is 8 out of 10. Next is prey availability. Well, the tiger is a carnivore and an apex predator. So how many of the prey animals in the USA can the tiger reliably bring down? Well, tigers are very adept hunters of deers or cervids in general. Well, they in their native habitat hunt red deer, roe deer, as well as in India they hunt sambar deer, axis deer, etc. So in USA they will be primarily targeting, in terms of deer or cervids, is white-tailed deer, mule deer, black deer, Sitka deer, fallow deer, as well as the invasive red deer, and on rare occasions the bighorn sheep. Now, bighorn sheep might be a bit iffy because bighorn sheep live in high mountains where tigers probably won't venture too much, but bighorn sheep occasionally do come down into the valleys, so that's when the tigers could occasionally hunt them. But obviously, the other deer species will be in the part of tiger's diet, as well as these will be the smaller species of animals which the tiger would go for. Now we will look into some of the medium-sized animals, such as the caribou, as well as the moose and elk, and obviously the infestation, the feral hogs. Well, the tigers in their native habitats hunt animals similar to these. For example, the nilgai is actually very similar in size to moose and elk. So tigers that hunt nilgai on a regular basis. By the way, nilgai are also invasive to USA. So that will also be a prey option for the tigers. But at the same time, the skill needed to hunt a nilgai or a sambar deer isn't that different from hunting a moose or an elk. So tigers would definitely target moose, elk, as well as on rare occasions caribou, and absolutely they would target boar, or in this case feral hogs, which are not too different from wild boars, to be honest, because pigs, the domestic pigs from which the feral hogs came in, are essentially wild boars that got domesticated. So obviously tigers are very adept hunters of the, in general, pig-like creatures, whether it's a boar, whether it's a pig, they are very adept and they will absolutely be hunting all of these creatures. Now let's look at the, by the way, this particular picture is fake. This is just for visualization. This is not a real picture. This is just something they released. About a rumor that they started, and this is quite topical, is that they started a rumor that there are tigers in Alaska which cross the Bering Strait and like from Russia to Alaska, which is a cool conspiracy theory, but it's probably not real because tigers don't live that close to the Bering Strait to have it crossed. Now, could a tiger cross the Bering Strait in winter if it lived close? Yes, but did it? Probably not. So again, this is probably not a real image of the tiger killing a caribou. However, in the places where tigers do live, and because caribous aren't that different in terms of size and build compared to the sambar deer, it won't be too big of a problem for tigers to bring them down. Now let's look at the largest prey animals that the tiger would be targeting, and this is the only large animal in this case is the bison. And bisons are very similar in build to the Indian gaur, the favorite prey of tigers. And tigers on regular occasions do bring down adult gaurs, which are, by the way, a lot bigger, not a lot bigger, but decently bigger than the bison. As you can see in this picture, they're quite a bit bigger, though they're built a bit differently, whereas the bison has a bit more of a hairy, loose overcoat and a different skull shape and smaller horns. On the other hand, gaurs have a different, more you can say hairless body with a dewlap and some massive horns as well. But either way, they are both bovines, and tigers have a preference for bovines. Other than gaurs, tigers also hunt water buffaloes, so that experience would also help, and also wild buffaloes, which are two different things, by the way. There's a forest buffalo and there is a water buffalo. But either way, tigers are very adept hunters of bovines, so they would definitely target the wood bison more often because that's the animal they would come across more frequently. Plains bison maybe sometimes, because whenever it's like at the edge of the forests, because plains bisons are very migratory and they usually live in the open plains a lot more, which are, while the tigers can absolutely ambush one in the open plains, they are not as likely to go there than in the woodlands, where they are more likely to encounter the wood bison. So definitely all of these prey animals can be in the menu for tigers. Primarily bison, moose, elk, and feral hogs will be the prey animals targeted by the largest adult tigers, whereas the more subadult or younger juvenile-ish tigers would target the deer species like the red deer, roe deer, or maybe not roe deer. Roe deers don't live in Alaska that much, as well as white-tailed deer, black-tailed deer, mule deer, etc., will absolutely be targeted by the younger tigers, as well as the older tigers too, like the bigger tigers, fully grown adults. But the more exclusive to adult tigers would be something like the bison and the moose, whereas all tigers would definitely try to bring down elks and feral hogs, because elks, moose, these are in the very much right size limit for, not size limit, but rather like preferred sized animals for tigers, whereas tigers in general prefer the meat of bovines over others. So due to that, bisons will also be targeted from time to time. So given that tigers manage to kill pretty much all available prey animals in the United States of America, that's why the tiger gets a 10 out of 10 in prey availability score. Every single herbivore in the United States of America can be reliably brought down by a tiger. So, which is weird because tigers don't get a 10 out of 10 in their native homeland. Like in India at least. They don't, because they are Asian elephants and one horned rhinos, which While tigers do on very rare occasions hunt, mostly it's reserved to the babies. They do hunt adults on ultra rare occasions, but for the most part it's reserved to babies, and even then the success rates aren't that good. So tigers actually don't have a 10 out of 10 when you look at their native range, whereas if you look at their success in the USA, they will have a 10 out of 10 because they can reliably bring down all of the prey animals. Now, granted, it won't be 100% success every single time because tigers also have the ambush different prey animals, and ambushes can fail. Animals can run away before the ambush. So it won't be a 100 out of 100 times success, but they can reliably bring down just about any prey that lives in North America, specifically in USA. Now let's look at the third category, which is the threats and competition. Now, USA is home to many native predators and invasive predators too, many of which will pose direct or indirect competition to the tigers, trying to establish themselves as apex predators. And for the more tropical regions, alligators, the invasive Burmese and rock pythons, and in rare occasions jaguars would pose a challenge to the tigers. On the other hand, for the more temperate regions, the cougar, the wolves, the black bear, and the brown bear will be the main competitors of tigers. So we will go over each of these and discuss how much this will affect the tiger or how this will affect the tiger, and let's get into it. Let's get python out of the way because adult tigers are pretty much immune to pythons. There isn't a single python on the planet that can actually kill an adult tiger. In a fight, an adult tiger would absolutely demolish the python with a single bite. And the reason pythons are an invasive species and they're growing so much in number in Florida is because in their native homeland they don't. Because in their native homeland, tigers, along with leopards and saltwater crocodiles, are the regular predators of these creatures. So they are very much accustomed to hunting these, large snakes. It will be somewhat of a unhappy reunion for the snake with their old predator. However, one thing we have to mention is this actually applies to all of the predators, by the way, is that the cubs of tigers are often in serious danger, especially from pythons, because mother tigers, or tigresses in this case, would often hide their babies into caverns or crevices at the mountainside or underneath some rocks where they are usually hidden from other predators. They are directly in the path of many pythons, and pythons sometimes do kill tiger cubs. So that's the only threat pythons would pose to tigers. Now let's look at the next one. Next one is an interesting one, alligators. Now, tigers have been able to kill crocodilians of decent size before. However, there are plenty of evidence where tigers have either been killed by large crocodilians or driven away by large crocodilians. So it's not as one-sided a matchup as, let's say, what you may call it, a python. So in this case, I believe obviously this will be the Bengal tiger because this interaction can only happen in Florida and Louisiana and places like that. So while for the most part they would avoid each other just like tigers and crocodiles in their native habitat, where for the most part the adult tigers and adult crocodiles, in this case adult alligators, would avoid each other altogether. Like in rare instances, obviously one can kill the other, but for the most part, because they live in very different regions, like tigers are land animals, whereas the alligators are aquatic ambush predators, they would for the most part leave each other alone. However, if a smaller crocodilian, like an alligator, or even the more elusive American crocodile, is sunbathing at the riverbank absolutely there is a chance that just like the jaguars killing the caimans, the tigers would ambush them and kill them. On the other hand, if a subadult tiger or a juvenile tiger is trying to cross a river and a particularly large 15, 16, or even 18-foot long alligator spots it, it would absolutely go for the kill. However, the biggest tigers would be left alone by the average alligator, and the biggest alligators would be left alone by the average tigers. So, with that out of the way, it will be somewhat of a tough relationship between them where they both have niche partitioning and avoid each other, but at the same time, they're both opportunistic predators. So, if they see the young of the other, absolutely they will take a chance and try to kill them. Next up is the jaguars and pumas. Now, jaguars and pumas have quite a bit of size disadvantage in this case, while not holding any other advantages. Like, they're not that much more agile than the tiger, nor are they pound for pound more like stronger than the tiger. So, due to this, tigers actually have experience living with similar sized animals, like leopards, for example, which are very similar in size and behavior to the jaguars and cougars. So it will be a similar relationship to the leopards as they will have with the jaguars and cougars, where the jaguars and cougars, for the most part, would avoid tigers altogether, like not even getting into the conflict with them, avoid areas with tigers, and thanks to niche partitioning, they would probably target prey animals which usually aren't targeted by adult tigers. So usually the more deer hunting niche will open up for these creatures. Now you can see here the sheer size difference between the two. At the same time, this is an Amur leopard, which is a bit distant, like further away from the tiger, but still you can see how much that size difference is. So pumas and jaguars would leave tigers alone. However, cubs that are not attended will absolutely be predated by jaguars and pumas on occasions. However, at the same time, the reverse is also true, where the cubs of pumas and jaguars would also be in constant threat from the tigers. And in terms of the behavioral adaptations, cougars will be a lot more likely to climb trees now to avoid getting into conflicts with tigers. Maybe even start caching their kills up a tree to avoid getting those kills stolen from like by tigers. So on the other hand, jaguars can do this, like they can absolutely take their kills up a tree because they are the biggest big cat in their native habitat. They don't ever have to, but now they might have to because there is an even bigger big cat present. Now, with that out of the way, let's look at some other competitors. Well, first of all, to everyone with the "oh, sloth bears demolish tigers," no. There's like one or two videos of sloth bears chasing away tigers, and there are countless videos of sloth bears killing and tigers killing and eating sloth bears. And so black bears will have a similar interaction with tigers because they are very close in terms of size. So younger, subadult, or juvenile inexperienced tigers would often be driven off kills by black bears, and on the other hand, the adult tigers would actively hunt black bears. Another thing you have to remember is that sloth bears are way more aggressive than black bears. They are way more likely to fight. They're like the honey badger of bears. They don't have size or strength to fight, but they do have aggression. On the other hand, black bears are very skittish. They can be intimidated easily, so they won't have as easy a time to intimidate a tiger from a carcass. Like, for example, in this instance, you can see that the black bear isn't that much bigger than the cougar. And at the same time, it is having a hard time against the cougar because the cougar is intimidating the black bear away. So the relationship between them will be as such. Adult tigers would regularly hunt black bears, though not as regularly as the herbivore animals I mentioned earlier, but from time to time they would definitely target black bears. On the other hand, subadult or juvenile tigers would be targeted by black bears, not to kill them but rather steal their kills. So, but for the most part, they would again avoid each other due to niche partitioning, because bears don't want to get killed by tigers. On the other hand, tigers don't want to get injured trying to kill a bear. So this is why for the most part they would avoid each other. And because tigers are quite ferocious, black bears would also adapt the habit of climbing trees more often. While they won't have the option to cache some animals up the tree because black bears aren't as predatory, and secondly, they don't have the necessary muscles to do so, they would prefer eating other food sources to avoid competition with a lot more successful, way more specialized, well adapted predator that can hunt prey animals much better. So black bears would now turn towards other food sources. One of those new food sources will be carcasses left behind by tigers. Similar situation with brown bears. Now I have my own dedicated video on brown bear versus tiger. Feel free to go and check it out if you want my opinion on who would win in a fight. But this is more of the interaction between the two species as a whole. Now absolutely brown bears would chase away tigers, especially younger tigers or tigresses will be chased away from their kills by larger brown bears, especially the big male brown bears. On the other hand, the large male tigers would hunt brown bears somewhat regularly, like the black bears. Again, not as regularly as herbivores, but they would be somewhat of a part of the tiger's diet. A small part. Because, again, tigers don't prefer bear meat that much. So, absolutely, both sides would be hunting each other's cubs again, like all the other competitions we mentioned. But this is the more likely scenario where usually the bigger male bears would start following the subadult tigers or the female tigers, or in this case tigresses, and either steal their kills if they can muscle in, or they would on occasions, wait for the tigers to finish the finish eating their kills and then move away, and then the bears, because they are very good bone eating creatures, bears can eat bones very well, they would also start following the tigers instead of simply, attacking it, because that's not something the brown bear wants either. Even if in some cases, though it would be rare, for the most part the tiger wins because of higher agility, strength, and better battle experience and weapons. Even then, the risk of getting injured trying to fight a brown bear will be too much for most tigers, so that they would avoid hunting brown bears for the most part. On the other hand, brown bears would also avoid tigers because getting killed by a tiger or getting severely injured by a tiger, even if the bear wins the confrontation, there is a high risk that the bear can receive severe injuries. So for the most part, these two behemoths would avoid each other. However, they would not completely avoid each other's territory. They would regularly scavenge off of each other's kill. Now, given tigers make a lot more kills than brown bears, because brown bears are opportunistic scavenger omnivores, whereas tigers are hyper specialized apex ambush predators, which are hyper carnivores. So due to that, it would be a lot more of the scavenging done on the brown bear side, because tigers, especially if a tiger kills a bison or a moose or an elk or even some of the larger species of deer, a lot of the carcass will be left behind, because a tiger in one sitting cannot eat more than 40 kilograms. And most of the animals that I mentioned in the prey selection, like prey availability section, are a lot bigger than 40 kilograms. So a lot of the carcass will be left behind, which means that the brown bears would most likely just wait till the tiger leaves, because otherwise trying to intimidate a creature that has just brought down a bison that usually brown bears don't even approach is not the smartest idea. And brown bears know this. They would avoid confrontation and simply just wait it out. Once the tiger's done, they can just come in and eat the remaining carcass. So that's the relationship between them that will be. That yes, if it's a cub, they will obviously kill each other. Like if a adult tiger finds a brown bear cub or a subadult brown bear, it would absolutely kill it without a hesitation. On the other hand, if an adult male bear finds a juvenile tiger or a cub, it would also absolutely kill them. Adults, for the most part, would avoid each other. However, the bears would sometimes scavenge from the tiger kills after the tiger abandons it. There will be obviously cases where the bear would intimidate some tigers away, but the vice versa will also be true, where the tigers would occasionally intimidate the bear away from its own kills as well. With that out of the way, let's look at the actual real challenge to the tiger, like that would really cause problems for the tiger, the one competitor, and that is wolves. Now, individually, a wolf can't do much against a tiger. The tiger is much bigger, way more muscle packed and stronger, it's way more agile, it has way deadlier weaponry, so the wolf simply doesn't stand a chance in a 1v1. However, wolves are rarely alone. Wolves live in large packs, and this is where we run into one of the tiger's big weaknesses. Now, I discussed this in detail in my video about the weakness of big cats, like what are their key weaknesses and how they get exploited. But the long and short of it is that if multiple wolves attack a tiger at the same time from multiple directions, the tiger can't fight all of them at once. However, if the tiger manages to corner itself and limiting the directions from which the wolves can attack it, it can fend off a lot of wolves. So, due to this, tigers in general would avoid going into open plains because they don't want to get surrounded by a wolf pack. On the other hand, the larger wolf packs would avoid going into the dense forests because they don't want to get ambushed and killed by tigers. And even then, in general, the confrontations would mostly be a lot of roaring, snarling, and barking. Because, again, in a confrontation, no one would be coming out of the battle without severe losses. Even if somehow the tiger wins, it will receive a lot of injuries against a wolf pack. On the other hand, no carcass is worth losing half the pack over. So this is why for the most part they would avoid each other, and we will see a niche partitioning again, where the tigers would take the ambush predator route of the woodlands, whereas the wolves will take the pursuit predator routes in the open plains. So with that out of the way, what is the total score of threats and competitions? While it won't be a smooth road for the tiger, reaching towards the apex predator status in North America, specifically USA, it won't be too difficult either, because while there are some competitions and some threats, for the most part tigers can either avoid them or simply overpower them. So tigers will not be too much bothered with these threats, and they will get threats and the competition score of 8 out of 10. Now, with combining all three of these scores, we get an average of 8.67. Sorry about that, but anyways, which is pretty good, which means the tiger will be very well adapted to live in the USA. It will be widespread into many different biomes, hunt many different type of animals, and establish quite a sizable population without too much problem. However, one big factor I have avoided talking about throughout this analysis is humans. Because in USA, hunting is legal, whereas in other places where tigers live, it's for the most part illegal to hunt a tiger. So, due to that, we don't know what the laws will be if a population of tigers are introduced in USA. They would be considered an invasive species, but if it's a government effort, we don't know what the case will be. Another thing is tigers need massive habitats. Like they need enormous areas, especially the males. They need like sometimes hundreds of square kilometers of area, which is just insanely big areas. Like it will obviously have some farmlands being in the area, and that is where conflict arises because tigers really like bovines, and it's way easier to kill a cow than it is to kill, let's say, a bison or something similar. Tigers would often go after cattle if they are in the same area, and this often brings them close to humans, and that is where wildlife conflict begins, human wildlife conflict, and oftentimes tigers are shot. Now, in places like India, it is kind of banned, it's kind of illegal to shoot a tiger. On the other hand, in USA, sometimes hunting tags can be purchased to kill certain predators. So, with that out of the way, if tigers are given the same level of protection as they are in the native habitat, yes, they can absolutely survive and thrive, like I mentioned in my previous analysis. However, if they are not, if they're treated like any other predator is treated in USA, tigers would go extinct in USA very quickly because of the hunters. Tigers are not adapted to being hunted because they have always been the apex predator in their native homeland. Their birth rates are never adapted to handle predation or hunting in this case from another species. So due to that, if tiger hunting is allowed, then tigers would probably not do very well in the USA. But if it is not, if tigers are given such protection from hunters, in that case tigers will actually do really, really well. Now, what about the overall effect on ecology? Now, we talked about how the ecology will affect the tiger. How will the tiger adapt? How will the ecology adapt? What will be the effects on the ecology? Firstly, the invasive species, more specifically feral hogs and pythons, will have a predator now. Previously, they did not have consistent predators that would hunt them. Like, yes, there will be the odd black bear or brown bear hunting a feral hog in very ultra rare scenarios. Maybe once one feral hog a year gets taken down by a bear. On the other hand, same goes with alligators and pythons. For the most part, pythons would just go on the land to avoid alligators. On the other hand, now with the introduction of the tigers, they will have a predator that would regularly go for them. Now, this will obviously drop the numbers somewhat. That will be one of the effects, where the number of feral hogs would reduce due to predation, and also the python numbers would reduce due to predation. At the same time, this will also make these creatures go out into the open a lot more to avoid getting ambushed. For the case of feral hogs, they will now go to the open grasslands a lot more. And this will make the job of feral hog hunters a lot easier, because one of the complaints about feral hogs is that they are super elusive. Once they run away into the forest, it's very difficult to spot them because oftentimes people hunt feral hogs from helicopters. Now, with the feral hogs actively avoiding the forests because there is a predator in there, now the feral hogs will be in the open far more often, which will allow the people from the helicopter to easily gun them down and have a real impact on the populations. Essentially, the tiger will flush the feral hogs out of their hiding into the forests. Similar behavior will be seen among the pythons. Pythons will now start avoiding staying on land because if an adult tiger spots a python on land, it's game over for the python. The python doesn't have nearly enough strength to overpower the tiger, nor does it have the speed to escape the tiger. Which means pythons would now go into the water a lot more often. Which means two things here. One, they will be directly in alligator territory, which means alligators will now be able to hunt these pythons a lot more frequently. And two, people who are hunting pythons are often doing it from a boat, which means they won't have to go look from island to island. Instead, they will find a lot more swimming snakes, which are way easier to kill with a spear gun. So definitely tigers will have enormous impact on both the most destructive, large, you can say invasive species. Now, obviously not against bugs or something, but definitely against larger species, tigers will have an impact. Secondly, tigers would benefit scavengers a lot because tigers are very frequent predators. They kill very frequently, just like any other big cat. Due to their extremely quick metabolism, they need to make a kill every 6 to 10 days. Almost every week they are dropping a carcass, which means plenty of food for all the scavengers, whether it's a coyote, badger, wolverine, foxes, condors, bears, wolves, even like other predators like mountain lions. All of them will have carcasses as a new source of protein, a new source of nutrient, which means the overall health of these animals will improve from the introduction of an apex predator. Similar situations were seen when wolves were reintroduced in the Yellowstone after an absence of 80 years. The health of bears improved almost within 6 years. Bears were way more healthy, and due to that, a lot of the scavengers are actually seed dispersers, especially bears, because bears don't have set territories. They are migratory creatures. They migrate quite a bit. And the more amount of protein they get, the healthier they are, the longer the migration is, which means the more seed dispersal. And that in turn benefits the forest, which is what happened in Yellowstone, where bears eating from wolf carcasses were now really healthy, and now they were spreading the seeds of berries far and wide, essentially increasing the availability of berries in the overall forest, which in turn, by the way, helped the bison population make a recovery. At the same time, since we're talking about bisons, all the herbivores will now become very mobile because tigers have enormous areas where they regularly patrol and they will regularly hunt these herbivores. So to avoid these tigers, the herbivores will be way more mobile. They will move from place to place a lot quicker instead of being stagnant, which means a single area of the forest would not be too pressurized by a lot of herbivores clustered in there. Now those areas will be freed up by tigers taking over those areas, because higher prey density means tigers would eventually move in there and start killing the herbivores, and the herbivores will have to move away after a while. And due to this process repeating over and over, a lot of the browsing herbivores like elks will now start to do seed dispersal as well, which means one, the forest health recovers, forest has time to recover because the animals are more often on the move. At the same time, animals that do eat seeds will now disperse them further away, which would again cause a chain reaction of trophic control, which would start from the top of the food chain and balance till the very bottom at the producers or plant level. And finally, the tigers will be an ecological proxy for many of the extinct cats, such as Xenosmilus or Smilodon fatalis and American lion. Now, granted, American lion's proxy will be the African lion, a better proxy, but still, a large feline predator that regularly hunts large prey animals like moose, bison, or elk would definitely be something tigers would definitely be a role tigers can fulfill as well, just as much as lions. because while during the time of American lions, more of the, you can say, USA was a prairie. Now majority of the wilderness in USA is woodlands. So due to that, tigers would be very well adapted to live in such woodlands. So that will be the effect that the tigers would have in the local ecology. So with that out of the way, that's my conclusion to the speculative evolution of tigers in USA. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know your questions in the comments for the Q&A video. And as always, like, share, subscribe, comment your thoughts, and remember,